In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. I am very excited to introduce today's guest. He is a founder who's taken an unconventional path from becoming an MD to founding AI-driven startups that seek to transform biotech and bioinformatics. After earning his medical degree, he pivoted early after spotting an opportunity to bridge computational science with life sciences. He went on to launch Phi Science, a deep tech institute, and later founded his current venture, PanBio, an AI-native platform designed to make biomedical data more accessible and actionable for researchers worldwide. With experience working across global markets and supporting growth across selling into businesses and governments, he brings a distinctive lens on how to scale transformative innovation. He is the founder and CEO of PanBio. Ahmad Jadallah, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Natalie. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. And I would love to start the conversation with your personal journey, because I know one of the most powerful themes for me when we explore on the show is, internal transformation that leaders go through, and going from medicine to tech founder and CEO is a unique leap, and I imagine required some shifts in your mindset. So would love to start, if you could tell us what was the moment that you decided to make that change, and then would love to talk about some of the shift that took place.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, I was going through med school, and the moment we started into going into actual medical sciences, like topics like pharmacology, pathology, and all of that, I knew I'm not meant to be a physician. I saw these fields as a little bit, how to say it in a nice way, very repetitive and a little bit like boring to me. But on the contrary, I was enjoying fields like genetics and cell biology and all of that. So I started doing research in med school, and that was in Jordan at the time. And Jordan is one of the countries that, unfortunately, we don't have a proper research infrastructure. And that, of course, is very important in my field and my domain. And I was starting to think, how can we make an actual transformation in research that is not country-led? That led me at that time to believe in applied research. Applied research is where basically it's a research that is part of the industry, supported by the industry, serves the industry in a way, a research that is aimed to be transformed into a product one day. Not like basic foundational research that goes into the journey of discovery per se for the sake of discovery. So applied research to a country like Jordan was very, very important. And at the same time, it's the kind of research that would be easier and more accessible if you relate it to an industrial incentive. If you bring pharma companies to support research, if you bring agri-tech companies to support research, then we can connect researchers, students, and scientists with the industry faster. The incentive is much clearer. And at that time, I established the Phi Science Institute. I was in my third year then. And Phi Science at that time was still actually a network, like a grassroots movement to support science, research. We were doing the most important product that we had was actually events and conferences where thousands of students came, not because our conferences were great, it's because it felt a huge need and a huge gap in students' life. And imagine a conference about Phi's scientific research conference or Phi's applied research conference, like conferences that you would expect it to be very boring, get attended by thousands of people. Like in a country like Jordan, which is a very small country of 6-7 million people at the time. So you would know that this reflects the passion towards science and towards research among the younger generation. And we still see that, of course, in different countries, not only in Jordan. So that drove me into the field of applied research and, of course, industry and all of that. bioscience grew from that point, and I finished my med school, but I knew that the day I'm gonna finish my med school, I'm gonna leave it all behind, and I did. I left clinical medicine, and I continued my research journey in stem cells at first, and then genomics and bioinformatics. What happened is that I moved to Boston, and when I moved to Boston, a new CEO for Science was hired, and I established my next venture, PanBio today. It was called BioNL initially, BioNL.ai, and today we're PanBio. And that was actually the movement. What really turned me from an MD um, into research, into startups, is that actual journey and that impact that I saw. And today I believe that research is really led through the industry. There is a huge shift in research and how we see research today, that it used to be coming out of universities most of the time.
Why do you think that is, that the shift has gone into kind of industry? Is it more just kind of that's where the money is, or faster to real world impact, or are there other dynamics at play?
The money is a very important factor, of course, but I think it's more like incentives. So companies, by definition, the incentive is mostly financial. And when the incentive is mostly financial, this means you have to get the biggest impact possible with the least amount of resources there is. And that by nature creates an ecosystem of innovation. Creates it's not innovation in the boring definition and the boring term. This word has been overused, but by nature, it creates people in those companies that try to achieve the maximum output possible in the resources that they have, and all of that creates innovation and inventiveness. Correct? You want to achieve things that go to the market, and the nicest thing about applied research in the industry is that it's real. It's real because it requires market validation. And any startup that works in deep tech or in research-based work know this truthfully. And we all came from academia, and we work in academia, and we know sometimes not all papers are properly validated, because again, and many papers get retracted every year. However, in the industry, it's different because the validation is real, which is the market. If your medication doesn't work, it will never work. You can publish 1,000 papers about it, but it will not get truly validated. And that's by itself creates this realism that founders live in, and they need to do their best. So I think that's why there has been a great shift and to applied research. And you would see universities as well changing their mechanisms. You would see universities changing their department names into more translational sciences. You will see an IP center and a commercialization office in every university almost today. And that shift is happening at the academic level as well, which is fast, which is great. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. And talk to me about the value proposition that your solution brings, because I do want to get into kind of what it does for government, what it does for business, and kind of what those go-to-market journeys have looked like for you. But do you have kind of a one line on the value that it brings?
Of course, yeah. Well, we support governments and large hospitals localize their clinical genetic testing. And in a more than one line, unfortunately, most countries today, maybe aside from the US, the UK, and other countries, they ship their clinical genetic testing. So when a patient comes to you at the hospital that they require a clinical genetic test, you take their blood sample and you send it outside the country. The problem with that is that basically it takes a long time for the results to come back. Sometimes it gets up to 10 weeks for that specific patient. In oncology, that's a very long time. It's very expensive in the healthcare system. In some countries, it reaches easily $10,000 per patient for whole genome sequencing. You are sending the data outside the country. very sensitive data to those countries, and many countries prohibit that, but they're sending it anyway. And four, the variant interpretation, like the interpretation of the mutations of what this patient has, the interpretation of the genetic changes is not localized to that country. Imagine a patient in Saudi Arabia or Bangladesh or India, they're being referenced to the Caucasian population, to the Caucasian white man, which is fine because this is, unfortunately, we in the West are doing the science. However, it's a big difference between what causes we receive a lot of variants of unknown significance. Those are variants that are oncologic. Those are variants that cause tumors and cancer. However, we assume they are of uncertain significance, that they have no effect on the patient. What we bring as PanBio to the we started going after hospitals, but we found ourselves selling to governments because many of those countries, this level of genetic testing is governmentally funded because they're expensive and all of that. So we basically make the time much faster, 48 hours instead of weeks. It's much more cost effective. We can do 3-4 patients instead of one. We keep all the data in that country. So we operate on a country compliant cloud provider, or we integrate on-prem. And basically we localize the interpretation as much as we can. If they have data, if they have published research, we put that as part of our our clinical pipelines. And those are the most important 4 value propositions. And we provide clinical geneticists in those countries with an end-to-end variant interpretation platform that would allow them to interpret those variants further. So this is what we do, and this is the value proposition that we bring to governments and hospitals.
So talk to me about some of those lessons learned in your early selling efforts. You talked about, trying to sell to hospitals, ultimately expanding into government. I know for many early stage companies, figuring out and experimenting with different go-to-market models is often necessary. What did that experience look like for you?
Absolutely. Well, selling in our space is really hard. Selling in martech and tech bio, in our case, is very hard. There are probably legal, regulatory processes that stop you. Yeah, it's a very niche area as well, and many biotech companies might face that. Approvals, compliance, and all of that. Well, to us, we initially found it hard to directly sell in the US because, again, it's a very competitive market. It requires a lot of validation, and for the first vertical, localizing clinical genetic testing, we thought, like, why don't we go and localize clinical genetic testing in everywhere else? So we started going to the Middle East. We went to Central Asia and East Asia, and we found that we found our product market fit there. So today we serve as the core provider for genomics data platform for countries in the MENA region and countries in Central Asia, and that's only because we want for those markets. So my advice to founders is that sometimes you go to markets that out of your comfort zone, markets that you think you would find a better product market fit there. And the second thing is that you need to make them an offer they can't refuse. That's in our space is a very important thing. So to us, we go to these governments and we tell them, whatever you're paying today for targeted panels or whole exome sequencing, we're willing to do whole genome sequencing with a less price. Regardless, we're willing to beat it. Why is that? Because we tell them, whatever data you generate, whatever data we generate together, we link that to your clinical data, and any retrospective data you have, we're willing to help you commercialize it with pharma. So we're not only saving you money, so that's our first vertical, localizing clinical genetic testing and the value propositions I mentioned. We want to help you commercialize your data through our analytics platform that functions in this case as a TRE, as a trusted research environment, to help pharma access data without actually accessing it. They will be running bioinformatics pipelines on top of the data without accessing the data. The data providers, every single hospital today, they want to commercialize their data, but they don't know how, or they're afraid, they cannot give data to pharma directly. So there should be a medium, an analytics platform that would do that part. And our analytics platform can function like that. So in this specific case, and specifically in healthcare or biotech, you really need the incentives need to be very high to convince them to jump ships to your platform, or to convince them to change an operation that has been going for decades now in those countries of sending samples outside, for example. And at the same time, you need to lobby for that. So as a company, you need to go after governments, you need to go after ministries of health, you need to go after actual decision makers in every market, and to provide so a huge part of what we do, by the way, is providing consulting work. So we need to go convince them, build a genome project for them, tell them how to localize clinical genetic testing, tell them how to store data locally, telling them how we can integrate Bionel on their on-prem infrastructure, and all of that. So a lot of that is consulting, a lot of that is lobbying, and in our space, you really need to do a huge component of that just to make it happen. And that's what really worked for us. And the pharma data component is what brings us back to the US market. So all pharma that will access data are in the US. So we go back to them now with a much stronger position that we set on these cohorts, the cohorts that they need for preclinical and clinical research. Now, only then, pharma is willing to use our platform. Before that, it was just another tool. But now this is a tool that sets on hundreds of thousands of patient data that we truly need and we truly require for our research. Now we're willing to use this analytics platform. So we charge them per data access, and we charge them per run, per analytics platform usage. And of course, any dollar we generate for the data, we share it with the data provider. There's a revenue sharing mechanism with the data provider. So now they make money, not only saving money on testing. But that's our formula. Like we have to navigate through years, and I think many people in tech bio, like healthcare software or bio software in general, need to do all of these components just to break into such hard markets.
Yeah, I love so much of your story and think it's applicable in other areas, like thinking about the best fit market and finding that and being open to surprises, so to it looking very different than what you thought, both in terms of geography and kind of who you're selling to. And then it sounds like you've been very conscientious of the ecosystem that exists, the incentives, and taking that outside in approach. And then, like you said, bringing something of value that then kind of multiplies on itself. So I think that's very astute. I'm curious to ask you kind of on your leadership through this journey. How would you say your own kind of style and skills have evolved alongside everything that the organization has learned?
I don't think there is something super unique in my leadership. On the contrary, I come from a scientific background, so probably I had to learn all of that the hard way. And but like as a small startup, you as a founder, of course, and every founder knows this, you need to do everything. And you will be doing product roles. If you're a coder, sometimes you need to code yourself. You need to do quality testing. You need to do, as I mentioned, product management. You need to do follow-ups with engineers and all of that. We did not mention sales, finance, accounting, auditing, reporting, all of that. You will be doing yourself as an early founder. But the thing is, maybe one small tip from experience is that you don't need the worst thing you can do as a founder is to get stuck there. It's very important as you grow as a company, you raise your first round, your second round, is to really learn how to delegate. So today, my leadership, we're 5 people. My leadership team, my executive team, 4 people work with me, and all of them they do a much better job in their fields. And so we have a head of for AI, we have a head for bioinformatics, we had a head for genomics and variant interpretation, and of course a chief business officer in the US, and their teams. The hardest component for any founder is to actually learn how to delegate and leave the other 50 tasks to other people and focus on what really matters at each stage of the company's growth. And that was definitely the hardest part. But today we are much faster, much more efficient than the early years when I used to do everything. It was it was insanely bad, and I'm certain of that. Not because maybe another founder is listening to me thinks that he can do it better, but because you cannot do everything at some point, and you need to focus on what matters. You focus on drawing the vision for the company, and you focus on doing sales early on. That's very, very important. Like founders need to be there in every business meeting, in every governmental meeting, in every client follow-up. Our oldest client, I still join their weekly meetings sometimes just to learn how it's going, just to make them comfortable that we're all there. I'm there for you because I closed that deal. I'm there for you until today, and we need to make sure that we stay very close to our governmental and business clients, and that's of course very, very important. So for founders, a lot of these leadership courses will not work. A lot of these leadership books will not work. I just want to advise them to do two things: build fast and stay close to your clients. Those are the most two important things in leadership, and all of your team will follow your leadership then. Just bring new clients, talk to users, and at the same time, keep building fast whatever you're building.
Yeah. And I think this theme of letting go and delegating is one that does come up often in my discussions. I'm curious if there's anything that worked for you in your ability to do that. Any frameworks or things you can remind yourself? How did that look like?
Well, it's very hard to actually delegate until this day. I find myself sometimes intervening in things I shouldn't.
I think we all do, much to our team's dismay.
Yeah, right. But like again, the best thing to make it happen is basically experience, is to go through it, is to reflect on what you do, and let experience teaches you how to do it. Basically, just go through the experience of delegation. And the second most important thing is that you need to know that any early hires, you bring them to tell you what to do, not you tell them what they do. That's very important. And because you're bringing a very strong team early on, that they will tell you what to do in their specific domains, you need to trust that they are probably better than you in what they do, right? And if you remind yourself of that, you will probably, it's going to be much easier for you to delegate as much as you can.
For sure. Well, and I think working in an environment today where there's so much changing across any industry and vertical, and with AI impacting virtually every industry, in some ways, I think it makes it easier because it's made it very clear that one person cannot lead everything and do everything and think about everything. And so you have to really spread that across the organization. So I think that's kind of an unexpected benefit of the environment we're in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not agree more.
Hey, this is Natalie, your Shift and Thrive host. After chatting with lots of CEOs, one thing is crystal clear. Leveling up your company means having a killer go-to-market strategy. That's what my crew at Magnitude Consulting does every day. If you're trying to step up your marketing game, whether it's strategizing, accelerating your pipeline, expanding into new markets, or getting into AI and automation, let's talk. No pitch, no pressure, just good conversation. Visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com/Natalie to schedule a time. Can't wait to connect. I'm curious to ask, outside of work, which sounds like it can be all-consuming, what is an area that you're most excited or passionate about right now?
I think after we exit this, we need to open a company in brain-machine interface. I'm very passionate about the brain-machine interface, and within the field, I read papers and every other day. And I think it's just an emerging field, and it's becoming and it's just growing. And and hopefully soon after we exit PanBio in a way, I will catch that wave of growing into it. I think I know a lot's happening with AI, and everyone is talking about AGI and all of that, but I think we're not yet there, not even close. I think the actual paradigm that will achieve um, artificial super intelligence or artificial general intelligence or artificial super intelligence is that we depend on a brain-like architecture and computing, and that's happening a lot today. There are many research that is depending on that. But I think the easiest way to do that, since we're not able to crack the brain anyway, is just to be cyborgs in a way. And then our brains and machines will probably be interacting together at a much better pace. Maybe moving part of that computing to our brains as well. So that's a very exciting area. I'm very happy about, and happy about all the research that's happening there. It's fantastic. It's fascinating. The advances there, and I believe it's a field that is highly underrated today, and will change humanity in the future very, very soon. How our brains interact with the external environment.
Yeah, it sounds futuristic and exciting, and I'm wondering if you have any specific examples to help bring it to life of what this might look like.
Yeah, well, there is a lot of there is a lot of types for brain machine interface, and we can find them in companies as well. So that's what I love about how we transfer research into industry. So, for example, Neuralink is one famous example of a brain machine interface device that connects directly to your brain cells, and it's a chip basically that actually immerses itself in the brain architecture. Some other, a little bit less invasive ways is basically you would leverage the blood vessels in your brain. And there is a huge map of blood vessels. So if we can put a device inside the major blood vessels in your brain, you would be able to collect greater and much better data than the external EEG methods of collecting data from outside the brain. And there is a lot of advancements in EEG as well, where now the initial problem with EEG was big noise signals, the bigger and bigger noise. But now there are many devices that are advancing in their data collection processes from the brain and in denoising the signal. So there is a lot of advancements in non-invasive brain-machine interface altogether. So to me, I think I'm betting into the most invasive ones, the Neuralink level and other devices in that space, because I think it's at that level that you're collecting very granular data about the brain operations and what's happening in the brain. And it's only at that level that we'll be able to make the biggest change that we're going after. And clinical trials already undergoing their way, and many patients today are using these devices across the different companies. And I think at first it's going to be, of course, patient areas applications like quadriplegia or hemiplegia or patients suffering with their vision or hearing loss, none of that. But at some point, this technology will be moving towards the normal person. And it's at that stage that it's going to be super exciting. Like, it's going to be another leap towards how we interact with the environment. You would see a huge leap with the internet, and then a much bigger leap with the iPhone, and then now it's a huge leap with virtual reality and virtual glasses. But immersing those devices directly to the brain would be a much bigger leap that we've never encountered before, in my opinion, and it's going to be a super interesting times. Dangerous, but super interesting.
Yeah, very high stakes to say the least, but I could see where it can, as you said, like unlock so many new areas and abilities for humanity across different arenas. And I know none of us can predict the future, but do you have a sense of like when that inflection point will hit where we start to see it more in day-to-day environments?
Yeah, well, I feel 5 to 10 years we're gonna be living it um, more than ever. It's already being rolled out for patients, like in 2026, 2027. Many clinical trials are underway anyway. But I think maybe between 2030, 2035, we're going to see more non-invasive devices to the general public. And maybe after that, in 10 years onwards from now, we're going to be more invasive devices being approved to the general public, especially with all the advancements happening today.
Yeah, which seem to be at a faster and faster pace. So it'll be here before we know it, it sounds like.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a bit more about you and your background. And can you tell me a little bit of who were you as a child? Like, did you have a sense you'd be getting into these types of fields? Tell me a little bit more about yourself.
I grew up in a village in Jordan, Amman, where governmental schools weren't probably the best, and education was probably much lower than what we wanted it to be. But the biggest impact on my life at that time was definitely my father. He was a physicist, and he was a teacher, and he used to teach physics, chemistry, biology, and geology, like most of the major scientific domains for high school students, because again we were somehow in a rural area and all of that. So he was teaching everything, but the most important part in my life as a child was how he was trying to so much to bring all of that science to my daily life, and even day to day kitchen things, or cooking, or doing things in the backyard and all of that. All of that, all of these experiences shaped who I am today. And he instilled in me the massive passion about science and research. Although I didn't know it until much later, but that was my childhood, and yeah, and then I was very lucky I went to a high school that it's called the Jubilee School, which supports which you need to apply and go through a lot of testing and logic and all of that to be enrolled in. It's a high school, but that school changed my life again, because it was highly experimental as a high school. I remember I took so schools generally in Jordan are very systematic, and but this one specific. So we were finishing the traditional curriculums, and then we had elective courses at that time, which is so revolutionary in Jordan. Like probably the only school that provides elective courses. And I remember I took a course in microbiology, and that course really changed my life, because I even didn't do this in med school. And that course was so unique, because uh, it wasn't like a course. It was just they would give you a kind of bacteria at the beginning of the semester, and half of the semester you would do all the tests you would do on bacteria in a microbiology lab, and the second half of the semester is a test where you take an unknown kind of bacteria, and you need to know what that type is by the end of the semester. That course really changed how I see things, really changed my life about experimentation and the importance of that and doing research. And this is what really shaped me. So when I went to med school, in a traditional med school, I felt that's not enough, probably not enough for me. And I really can make a much bigger impact, and give all of these scientific experiences I went through to other people and to the younger generation. And it grew with me, I think, until this day. So I still try to participate in much educational activities as I can, to the university students or to high school students, and to talk more about science, about research, how they can shape their life, how they can go against the wave of how they need to be a physician or an engineer in our countries, and how they can be scientists. But I think all of these experiences really shaped who I am today from us, and why I care a lot about doing science and research and applied research to provide the highest impact there is.
Yeah, yeah. I love that one. I like that the through line is really bringing kind of the real world to you as you were a child, a student, et cetera, because I think, schools are starting to catch up to that a bit now, but I think there's still a lot that's taught in an academic way, and it's so far removed from, how it shows up in the real world. And actually a lot more excitement, I think, is brought up for kids when they do connect it. So, the kind of lessons your dad, it sounds like, shared with you. And in school, like, I have my son is in 6th grade, and in their math class, they just did like an entrepreneurial math curriculum where they, broke out into small groups. They had to go to like a local business, interview the owner, get some of the numbers around how many people work there and how much do you earn, and then kind of run some, financial analysis. And I just love that they're starting that at such a young age, because I think, for me personally, for example, if I had more connection between kind of the math I was learning in the classroom to what that might look like in the business world, I think I would have been a lot more excited to be studying in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot agree more. Yeah. I'm very excited about how education is changing as well. Yeah, you're right. And I think the future is much brighter because of that, seriously. And once those kids see the actual impact of what they study in their day-to-day life, and that would definitely create a much brighter generation about, and that cares really about science. And if we have a little bit more people that the people that are really excited about science can be enabled to go into science and do more science, that in itself is a superpower for any society.
Yes, yes, for sure. Well, I'd love to ask you, before we wrap up the conversation, if you were sitting in a room with your younger self, what advice would you give you?
I would really not change anything. I've gone through many failures through my entrepreneurial life, and that's very typical for any founder. But I believe that without all of these failures, without all of these learnings, I would never be the person being who I am today, building all of that, what I believe is an impactful product that is actually helping patients today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really loved so much of what you shared. From, you can feel the passion for what you do and the impact that you have. Hearing about how you navigated getting your platform into the right hands with a very complex and nuanced set of go-to-market motions. So thank you for everything that you shared with us. And thank you, too, to everyone who's listening. If today's conversation sparked something for you or taught you something new, and I'm sure that it did, please pass this along to another leader, because we know that insights and ideas like this fuel fresh thinking in all of us and help us drive real transformation in our companies and in ourselves. So thanks again, Ahmed, and this has been another fantastic conversation on Shift and Thrive. I'll see you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.